Yielding now, I call on the ranking member, Mr. DeSaulnier, for his questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to go back to your opening comments and ours that I'm hopeful that we can work together on this. I feel like we're starting to fall back into a pattern where we're jumping to conclusions based on our historical perspectives. Ms. Goldman, I want to ask you about ghost jobs. I've asked this a lot and spent a lot of time on it. Mr. Kelly talked about, sorry, Mr. Kelly, I'm going to put words in your mouth, but this is the purview of us up here, is the wonder of algorithms. Mr. Walton, you alluded to this too, and I'm struck by the research on ghost jobs in particular and cognitive development on social media. There's pretty common knowledge at this point. So ghost jobs, research now tells us almost 50% of the jobs posting are not real. It's data collectors trying to get more information. And on the other side, are young people in America being creative? Up to 60% of the applications are not real applications. So this goes into privacy and algorithms. How do we get control of this and be transparent so we make sure that people aren't unwittingly giving up more data and more data so the algorithms can be more predictive and more targeted? And in addition to that, all the cognitive development where CDC discovered that a third of adolescent girls in this country are being targeted specifically by YouTube's algorithms who are predisposed to depression to deliver them to YouTube's on how to commit suicide, and all of this was part of the algorithms, according to research at CDC, to actually get young women in particular, as they develop cognitively, to be predisposed even further to depression. So those two things, how algorithms and AI are affecting the workforce, but also our young people.
Yeah, thank you, Congressman. And so let me tackle kind of both the collection of data and privacy in the workplace. So, we have a lot of data brokers buying and selling information, including about workers. And when they sell that information to employers, employers can use it in ways that are potentially discriminatory, invade their privacy, or could be used for anti-union purposes. Employers can also sell information about their workers back to data brokers, and that can be done without the workers' knowledge or consent. So we have an opaque market here that needs regulating and raises a lot of concerns about workers' privacy and civil rights. We know workers do not have sufficient privacy rights in the workplace. Employers are collecting information every day from them, from electronic wearables, geo-tracking, facial recognition software, cameras in their cars, their trucks, their home computers, voice recognition software, keyboard logging. I could go on, but there is a lot of surveillance used to collect information, also the data that they're collecting from social media, the internet, and data brokers. And so I think we really need to consider making sure that data is not being collected if there's not a business purpose for that data, it's not being stored longer than needed, workers know what data is being collected about them, that data is safeguarded and won't be exposed to breaches, and that it's not being sold.
George Santana said we're condemned, for those who forget history, are condemned to repeat it. Having grown up in Lowell, Massachusetts, and listened to my grandparents and their generation talking about the Industrial Revolution, there was certainly great benefits that you alluded to. But workers didn't get protections because employers gave it to them. I'm reminded of one of my heroes, who was the first woman cabinet secretary, Secretary of Labor, Frances Perkins. I have an original photo of her, and the Triangle Shirtwaist factory fire, where she, as a young upper-class woman, went across Washington Square and watched those young people fall to their deaths because we didn't have worker protection. So let's talk a little bit about how we got child labor laws during the Industrial Revolution. For all those benefits, history repeating itself, employers just didn't, not all employers, just took care of their employees. So we should be aware of not being modern day Luddites, but we should also learn from history that workers didn't benefit this without them responding to it. So the first labor union was the amalgamated textile workers, which were young women who came from the farms and started losing their fingers because there wasn't workforce protection. So talk a little bit about how we responded and protected workers so we don't do the same thing here, that we see all the benefits of AI, but we don't have an appropriate protection for workers and not just trust people. We have to have, to your comments, Mr. Chairman, we have to work together to make sure we don't repeat the mistakes of history.
Yeah, thank you, Congressman. And it is so important that workers and unions have that voice in their workplace and that collective action. As you know, the NLRA has not been updated since the late 50s. And so, workers' interest in joining unions and being able to protect themselves in the workplace is surging, but private sector union density is at historic lows. So yes, as Mr. Kelly says, we have laws on the books, but we need to update those laws and enforce them to make sure that all workers have access to them. And then, of course, it is urgent that Congress act. It is long overdue that we have additional protections for workers that respond specifically to the challenges that they are facing from AI in the workplace.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen, for yielding. Votes have been called, so we're going to try to wrap this up. I will now call and recognize the ranking member for his closing remarks, and I'm going to make mine quick, and I would like you to, so we can get the votes.
Mr. Chairman, subtlety is one of your real strengths, as is mine. I just want to thank you for having this hearing. I think we could do really good work here, Mr. Chairman, together, and it would benefit the employers and the employees and learn from history. With all due respect, history teaches us that workers don't benefit at the same rate of investors. So let's get ahead of that. Let's make sure that we are not just assuming the marketing that this is going to benefit everyone. So I'd be thrilled to work with you and all the panelists to have an honest, and sometimes honest means sometimes we're not going to agree on this, to get to a conclusion with all the institutions that are sort of set up on both sides to go to warfare on this. We reserve those, that's my expression, but let's work ahead of it and see if we can get it right. And to the EU, I think we can learn from them too. They're doing some really good things, and I think the states are responding to that. I know California is as well. So if you're worried about us getting wrong, let's get at the table, roll our sleeves up, and most importantly to me, learn from history. We start screaming about Luddites. Well, Luddites are misrepresented in Western history and the Industrial Revolution to me because they overreacted to save their jobs. But on the other hand, they were trying to protect, in their own way, things that came about. So child labor laws happened because people organized and said, we don't want 12-year-olds losing their fingers. We want to protect workers. So minimum wage, all those things happened because the workforce had a say. Why don't we get ahead of that rather than have people suffer and the industry suffer and have people lose trust as they're losing right now on things like ghost jobs? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back. And I look forward to working with you on this.